All right, settle down, everyone. Put the oat milk lattes away, silence the iPhones, and look at me. I know. You saw the syllabus and thought, oh great, professor's going to spend an hour reading a list of names that sound like IKEA furniture. You saw 1 Chronicles 1 through 7, and you immediately started wondering if you could drop the class and still get your credits in underwater basket weaving. But stay with me, because today we're diving into what I like to call the ancient LinkedIn of the Iron Age. This isn't just a list of names, it's a massive, sweeping, multi generational epic about identity, scandal, property disputes, and one guy who was so stressed out he actually convinced God to give him a real estate upgrade. We're looking at the first 7 chapters of Ford Chronicles, and if you think your family Thanksgiving is awkward, you haven't seen anything yet. This is the ultimate previously on segment of human history. The author of Chronicles, let's call him the Chronicler, sounds like a Batman villain, right? Is writing this for people who've just come back from exile. They're standing in the ruins of Jerusalem, scratching their heads and asking, who are we again? Do we still own that plot of land next to the Starbucks? And the chronicler says, sit down, kids. I'm going to tell you exactly who you are, starting from the literal first guy. Chapter 1 opens with a bang, or rather, a pop, as in the population of the entire world. It starts with Adam, just Adam, Seth, Enosh. It's the ultimate fast forward. It's like watching the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe on 10x speed. We zip through the antediluvians, bypass the flood, and suddenly we're looking at the sons of Noah. Now pay attention to the geography here. You've got Japheth's kids heading toward Europe, Ham's kids toward Africa and the Levant, and Shem's kids sticking around the Middle East. It's a map of the known world drawn in bloodlines. And yes, this will be on the exam, or at least the general vibe of it will be. Now here's where it gets weird. We get to Abraham. You remember him? Big beard, lots of stars in the sky. The chronicler doesn't just focus on the chosen line. He lists Ishmael's kids. He lists the kids Abraham had with his second wife Keturah. He even spends a massive amount of time on the kings of Edom, Esau's descendants. Why? Because the chronicler wants you to know that Israel doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's like your Netflix algorithm. It knows what you're watching, but it also knows what everyone else is watching. By showing where everyone else came from, he's highlighting how specific and weird the story of Israel actually is. It's the you are here red dot on the giant mall map of the universe. But then we hit chapter 2, and the camera zooms in. We're done with the wide-angle lens. Now we're looking at the sons of Israel, Jacob's boys. And specifically, we're looking at Judah. If the tribes were a boy band, Judah would be the one who goes solo and wins 10 Grammys. Why? Because David is coming. But before we get to David, we have to deal with the family drama. The chronicler doesn't sugarcoat it. He mentions Judah's firstborn, who was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and, poof, he's gone. He mentions Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, who, well, let's just say she had a very creative way of ensuring the family line continued. It's messy. It's Real Housewives of Canaan stuff. I love this part because it shows that this holy lineage isn't made of porcelain saints. It's made of people who made questionable life choices. We see Hezron, Caleb, Jeramal. These are the power players. And eventually, in chapter 3, we get to the VIP section, David. The chronicler lists David's sons born in Hebron: Amnon, Daniel, Absalom, Adonijah, and then the ones born in Jerusalem, including Solomon. It's like a royal guest list, but then it keeps going. It follows the line of kings all the way through the exile and past it to Zerubbabel. It's a promise. It's saying the crown might be in the dirt right now, But the line is still here. The fire hasn't gone out. All right, I know what you're thinking. Professor, I'm losing the thread. There are too many people named Azariah. I know. Bear with me. Let's skip over to chapter 4, because this is where we find one of the coolest Easter eggs in the Bible. Tucked away in a list of Judah's descendants is a guy named Jabez. Now, the name Jabez in Hebrew sounds like the word for pain or sorrow. Imagine your mom naming you ouch or migraine. That's his life. He was born in sorrow, and he's carrying that branding. But Jabez says, no thanks. I'm not playing this character. He prays a famous prayer. You might have seen it on a keychain in the early 2000s. Asking God to bless him, enlarge his territory, and keep him from harm so he won't cause pain. Think of Jabez like that one guy in a zombie movie who finds a hidden stash of supplies and actually survives. In a book full of a begat B who begat C, Jabez stops the music. He's a reminder that even in a massive, predetermined genealogy, there is room for the individual. There is room for the person who says, I want my life to be bigger than the name I was given. It's genuinely fascinating, this little island of personal narrative in a sea of names. Moving on to chapter 5, we hit the Transjordan tribes, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. These are the guys who looked at the land on the east side of the Jordan River and said, yeah, this looks great for our cows, we'll stay here. But there's a tragedy here. Reuben was the firstborn, right? He should have had the birthright. But, and this is a bit of a don't try this at home moment, he defiled his father's bed, so the birthright went to the sons of Joseph. The chronicler is very clear. You can lose your place in the story if you don't respect the story. These tribes were warriors. The text describes them as valiant men, men able to bear buckler and sword. They were the frontier guys. Think of them like the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones, but with better weather and more sheep. They fought the Hagarites and won because they trusted in God. But, and here's the snapback to reality, they eventually prostituted themselves to the gods of the land, and God stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and they were carried away into exile. It's a cautionary tale. You can have the best land and the sharpest swords, but if you lose your center, you lose everything. Now, chapter 6. This is the big one. It's the longest chapter in this section, and it's all about the Levites. If Judah is the royalty, the Levites are the infrastructure. They're the IT department, the stage crew, and the HR department of the tabernacle and the temple. We get the line of high priests: Aaron, Eleazar, Phinehas, going all the way down to Jehozadak, who went into captivity when the Lord carried away Judah and Jerusalem by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. But it's not just about the priests. The chronicler gives a huge shout out to the musicians. We see Heman, Asaph, and Ethan. These guys were the rock stars of the ancient world. David appointed them to lead the service of song in the house of the Lord. I love the detail here. It says they ministered with singing before the dwelling place of the tabernacle. Think of it like the sound engineers at a Coachella set, but the stakes are literally eternal. The chronicler lists their villages, their cities of refuge, and their territories. Why? Because even if you don't have an inheritance of land like the other tribes, you have a place. You have a purpose. You are essential to the harmony of the whole. Finally, we hit chapter 7, which covers the rest of the gang. Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, the other half of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Asher. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour. We see Ephraim's heartbreak. His sons are killed by the men of Gath while they were trying to steal some cattle. It says Ephraim mourned many days. It's a human moment. Even in these lists, there's grief. There's the building of cities. Ephraim's daughter Sherah built both Upper and Lower Beth Horon. We see the bravery of the sons of Jediel, mighty men of valor, 17,200 soldiers fit for war. But I digress. Back to the point. Why are we reading this? Why did the chronicler spend years, presumably, compiling these records? It's because he wanted the people to know that they were part of a chain that couldn't be broken. He's telling them, you've been to Babylon, you've been slaves, you've lost your homes, but look at this list. You go back to Adam, you go back to the promise of Abraham, you go back to the songs of the Levites. It's like looking at your family tree and realizing your great-great-grandfather survived a shipwreck and your grandmother lived through a revolution. It changes how you stand. It changes how you walk. These genealogies are the structural integrity of the Jewish identity. They are the proof that God doesn't just deal with humanity in the abstract. He deals with people named Shimei and Zadok and even poor old Pain Jabez. So, here's your takeaway, and yes, this is the part you should underline. 1 Chronicles 1:7 is the chronicler's way of saying that history isn't just a series of random accidents. It's a curated collection of lives. Every name in these chapters represents a story, a struggle, and a survival. They're the bricks in the wall that lead all the way from the Garden of Eden to the hope of a new Jerusalem. Next time you're feeling like just another number in the university system, just remember, you're part of a lineage too. Hopefully your mom didn't name you Migraine, but if she did, take a page out of the book of Jabez and ask for a territory upgrade. Class dismissed. Don't forget your umbrellas, it looks like rain, and I don't want to have to write a genealogy of students who caught a cold and couldn't make it to the midterm. See you on Thursday. All right, everyone, settle down, put the lattes away. Unless you brought one for me, in which case, bring it up front. Today we're diving into a section of the Hebrew Bible that, let's be honest, usually acts as a literary sedative for most readers. I'm talking about the first half of 1 Chronicles. I know, you see genealogies in the syllabus, and you immediately start checking how many credits you actually need to graduate. But stay with me, because if you look closely, what we've got here isn't just a boring list of names. It's basically the 10th century BC version of a LinkedIn networking event combined with a Marvel Cinematic Universe origin story. Think about it. Why do we care who begat whom? It's about identity. It's about who belongs in the room when the world is being rebuilt. We're looking at these specific documents, 1 Chronicles 4, 5, and 6, and then tracing the narrative arc all the way through the reign of David. It's an epic journey from who are these people to how did this guy David become the most important name in the history of the monarchy. Let's start with the phone book of the ancient world. Chapters 4 through 6 are doing some heavy lifting. You've got the tribe of Judah in chapter 4, which is the VIP section of the family tree because that's where the kings come from. We stumble upon a guy named Jabez. Now, Jabez is famous because he pops up in the middle of a list of names like a sudden plot twist. He prays to God to enlarge his borders. It was a huge bestseller in the early 2000s. Everyone wanted a Jabez-themed coffee mug. But in the context of the text, it's a moment of grace in a list of biological facts. It tells the reader that even in the middle of a rigid system of who you are, what you do, and how you pray still matters. Then we move to chapter 5, looking at the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. These are the guys living across the pond, east of the Jordan. They're the frontiersmen. The text tells us they were valiant men, great with shields and swords. But, and this is a big but that'll be on the exam, it also tells us why they eventually got carried away into exile. It wasn't just bad luck or a bigger army. The text says they were unfaithful to the God of their fathers. It's a cautionary tale embedded in a census. It's like your Netflix algorithm suggesting a documentary on how to lose your empire in 10 easy steps right after you watch a war movie. And then, chapter 6. Oh, chapter 6. If you're a Levite, this is your Super Bowl. It's all about the descendants of Levi, the priests, the singers, the guys who handled the heavy lifting of the religious world. This isn't just trivia. This is setting the stage for everything David does later. You can't have a kingdom without a spiritual heartbeat. And you can't have the Ark of the Covenant without the right people to carry it. It's like trying to run a high-end restaurant without a head chef. You can have the best ingredients, the gold, the temple, the king. But if you don't have the Levites, nobody's getting fed. Now, here's where it gets weird and wonderful. We transition from these lists into the actual drama. We skip over a lot of Saul's reign. In 1 Chronicles, Saul is basically the before picture in a weight loss ad. Chapter 10 gives us his end. And it's grim. He's on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines are closing in. And instead of a heroic last stand, it's a tragedy of his own making. The chronicler doesn't hold back. Saul died because he was unfaithful, and, get this, because he asked for advice from a medium instead of asking God. It's the ultimate don't Google your symptoms moment. He went to a witch instead of the source, and the kingdom was handed over to David, the son of Jesse. Suddenly, we're in chapter 11, and David is being anointed king at Hebron. This is the honeymoon phase. All of Israel shows up and says, "We're your bone and your flesh." It's a beautiful moment of national unity. But David doesn't just sit on a throne and eat grapes. He goes straight for Jerusalem. At the time, it was held by the Jebusites, who were so confident they could hold the city that they basically mocked David. David, being the absolute legend he was, said, "Whoever leads the charge gets to be commander-in-chief." Joab steps up, takes the city, and suddenly, Jerusalem becomes the city of David. But a king is only as good as his team, right? Chapters 11 and 12 introduce us to David's mighty men. Think of these guys as the Delta Force or the SEAL Team 6 of the Iron Age. You've got Joshobeam, who allegedly took out 300 guys with one spear. You've got Eleazar, who fought until his hand literally froze to his sword. I get a cramp just typing an email. This guy stayed in the fight until he was physically part of his weaponry. My favorite story in this whole section, and yes, you should definitely know this, is the cup of water incident. David is hiding out in a cave, feeling nostalgic and thirsty, and he sighs, "Man, I'd love a drink from the well by the gate of Bethlehem." He's just venting. But 3 of his top guys hear him, break through the entire Philistine army lines, which is basically like running through a riot to get a Starbucks, grab the water, and bring it back. And what does David do? He doesn't drink it. He pours it out as an offering to God because he says the water is effectively the blood of the men who risked their lives for it. That's leadership, folks. That's why people followed him. He respected the sacrifice more than his own comfort. Stay with me. We're getting to the big stuff. Now that David has the city and the army, he needs the presence. He wants to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. This is chapter 13. And here we have the famous Uzzah disaster. They put the Ark on a new cart, which sounds nice, right? New car smell, fancy wheels. But the Ark wasn't supposed to be on a cart. It was supposed to be carried by the Levites using poles. When the oxen stumble and Uzzah reaches out to steady the Ark, bam, God strikes him down. It feels harsh, doesn't it? I know you're thinking he was just trying to help, but think of it like this. The Ark is like a live nuclear reactor. There are very specific protocols for handling it. You don't just wing it with the glory of the creator of the universe. David gets terrified, rightfully so, and parks the Ark at the house of a guy named Obed-Edom for 3 months. And what happens? Obed-Edom's house gets blessed like crazy. It's like he won the lottery every day for 90 days. David sees this and realizes, okay, the Ark isn't a curse. We just handled it wrong. So, in chapter 15, he does it by the book. He gets the Levites. Remember chapter 6? This is why we read it. They sanctify themselves. They use the poles. And they bring the Ark into Jerusalem with a parade that would put Rio's carnival to shame. David is out there dancing in a linen ephod, which was basically like a king dancing in his gym clothes. His wife Michal looks out the window and is absolutely mortified. She's the old guard who thinks royalty should be stiff and formal. David is the new guard who thinks royalty should be the first to worship. Once the Ark is settled, David gets this idea. He's sitting in his nice cedar palace, probably admiring the crown molding, and he looks at the tent where the Ark is kept and feels guilty. He tells Nathan the prophet, "I want to build God a house, a real temple." Nathan's like, "Go for it, Dave." But that night, God speaks to Nathan and gives him a message that changes everything. This is chapter 17, the Davidic covenant. God essentially says, "Did I ever ask for a house? I've been a tent dweller since Egypt. You want to build me a house? No, David, I'm going to build you a house." And he's not talking about architecture. He's talking about a dynasty. He promises that David's throne will be established forever. This is the theological Big Bang for the rest of the Bible. Everything from this point on, all the hopes for a Messiah, all the expectations of a future king, points back to this promise. God basically tells David, "You worry about being the king I called you to be, and I'll worry about the real estate." David's response is one of the most humble prayers in Scripture. He sits before the Lord and says, "Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house, that you have brought me this far?" It's a moment of pure, unadulterated gratitude. No ego, no "I built this city on rock and roll." Just a man realizing he's part of a story much bigger than himself. But don't think for a second that David becomes a pacifist. Chapter 18 shows us the expanding empire. He smashes the Philistines, subdues the Moabites, defeats the king of Zobah, and makes the Syrians pay tribute. The text says, "The Lord preserved David wherever he went." It's a winning streak that would make the 1972 Dolphins jealous. He's taking the gold and silver from these conquered nations and, here's the kicker, he's setting it aside for the temple he's not even allowed to build. He's working for a future he won't even see. I know we've covered a lot of ground, from ancient family trees to special ops missions to divine real estate contracts. But here's the takeaway. The thing I want you to remember when you're writing your essays. 1 Chronicles isn't just about the past. It's about continuity. The genealogies show where they came from. The stories of David show what they're capable of when they're aligned with their purpose. It's a book written for people who had lost their kingdom and were trying to find their way back. It's a reminder that their identity wasn't in their zip code, but in their lineage and their loyalty to the covenant. All right, class is dismissed. Go forth and be mighty men and women. And for the love of all that is holy, if you ever find yourself moving a sacred artifact, please use the poles. No carts. I don't want to lose any of you before the midterms. See you on Thursday. All right, everyone, settle down. Settle down. Put the lattes away, or at least hide them behind your tablets. I'm not a monster. Today, we're diving into a section of the Hebrew Bible that most people, frankly, skip over because it looks like the world's most intense Excel spreadsheet. We're talking 1 Chronicles, specifically the David's Reign notebook, which covers everything from the who's who of tribal ancestry to the logistical nightmare of building the most famous temple in history. Now, I know what you're thinking. Professor, I saw the syllabus. It's just lists of names. How is this fascinating? Well, let me tell you, if you think this is just a phone book from 3,000 years ago, you're missing the Game of Thrones meets Extreme Makeover Home Edition vibe that's actually happening here. We're starting with what I like to call the DNA of a nation. If you look at chapters 7 and 8 of 1 Chronicles, we've got these massive genealogies: Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Asher. It's the ultimate 23andMe report. But why? Why did the author spend so much ink on who begat whom? Think of it like a Netflix algorithm, but for national identity. After the Babylonian exile, these people were coming home to a pile of rubble. They needed to know they belonged. They needed to prove their street cred, so to speak. Chapter 9 even lists the folks who moved back into Jerusalem first: the priests, the Levites, and my personal favorites, the gatekeepers. These weren't just guys standing by a door. They were the elite security team for the divine. They had to be documented because you didn't just walk into the tabernacle without an invite and a background check. But then we hit the pivot point in chapter 10. It's the end of an era. Saul, the first king, dies on Mount Gilboa. It's a dark, gritty prologue. Saul falls on his own sword, the Philistines are gloating, and it's a total disaster. The text is very clear. Saul failed because he wasn't searching for the Lord. It's the ultimate what not to do for the students in the room. And that's where David steps in. Now David gets a bit of a PR makeover in Chronicles. We don't see as much of the Bathsheba scandal or the family drama here as we do in the book of Samuel. Instead, we see David the architect, David the COO, David the project manager. If David were alive today, he wouldn't just be a king. He'd be the guy running a Fortune 500 company while also composing Grammy-winning albums on his lunch break. Stay with me now, because here's where the national organization part of our notebook kicks in. David realizes he's not the one who gets to build the temple. God tells him, "You've got too much blood on your hands, Dave. You're a warrior. Let's leave the construction to your son, Solomon, the man of rest." But does David just retire to a beach in Joppa? No. He spends the rest of his life doing the pre-production work. In chapter 22, we see the budget. And folks, the budget is insane. We're talking 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver. In modern currency, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. David's basically like, "Solomon, I've already bought the lumber, I've hired the masons, and I've filled the bank account. All you have to do is not mess it up." It's the ultimate parental head start. But David doesn't stop at the materials. He organizes the people. He divides the Levites, 24,000 of them to oversee the work. Can you imagine the HR department needed for that? He splits them into divisions, ensures everyone has a shift, and makes sure the worship never stops. And the musicians? Oh, the musicians are my favorite part. Chapter 25 tells us about 288 professional musicians led by Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun. This wasn't a guy with an acoustic guitar at a campfire. This was a full-scale professional orchestra and choir, prophesying with harps and cymbals. It was the Coachella of the ancient world, but with more incense and fewer flower crowns. He also organizes the 12 captains in chapter 27. Think of this like the National Guard. There were 12 divisions, one for each month of the year, each with 24,000 soldiers. David created a system where the country was always defended, but no one was stuck in the barracks all year. It was efficient, it was fair, and it kept the economy moving. He even had treasurers for the storehouses in the fields and the vineyards. Yes, there was a guy specifically in charge of the wine cellars, Zabdi the Shifmite. I know. Someone's going to ask if that's an internship opportunity. No, the position has been closed for 3 millennia. The most moving part of all this, though, is in chapters 28 and 29. David gathers all the leaders of Israel, the princes, the captains, the mighty men, and he delivers his final charge. He stands up on his feet, and the text makes a point to say he stood, even though he was old and probably exhausted. And he hands the blueprints over to Solomon. He tells him, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear or be dismayed, for the Lord God will be with you." And then comes the fundraising. David doesn't just demand the people give. He gives first. He throws in his own personal over and above stash of gold and silver. And when the leaders see the king putting his skin in the game, they follow suit. They give willingly, with a perfect heart. There's this beautiful moment of national unity where everyone is celebrating because they're building something bigger than themselves. David's prayer in chapter 29 is one of the most magnificent pieces of literature in the Bible. "Thine, O Lord, is the greatness, and the power, and the glory, for all that is in the heaven and in the earth is thine." He acknowledges that they aren't actually giving God anything. They're just returning a small portion of what he already owns. It's a total ego check. The lecture wouldn't be complete without mentioning the transition of power. Solomon sits on the throne while David is still alive. It's a peaceful transfer, which, if you've studied ancient history, is about as rare as a quiet day in this lecture hall. All the princes and the mighty men submit to Solomon. The acts of David the king are recorded by Nathan the prophet and Gad the seer, and then David dies at a good old age, full of days, riches, and honor. So, what's the takeaway? Why did I just spend 20 minutes talking about ancient treasurers and tribal lists? Because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a masterclass in legacy. David knew his time was up, but he didn't check out. He used his remaining strength to organize, to provide, and to inspire the next generation to build a palace that wasn't for man, but for the divine. He turned a ragtag group of tribes into a highly organized, worshiping machine. The lesson for you lot? You're all going to graduate and go off to build your own temples, whether that's a career, a family, or a community. The question 1 Chronicles asks you is, are you doing the prep work? Are you organizing your Levites? Are you giving with a perfect heart? Or are you just coasting like Saul on Mount Gilboa? I'll leave you with this. If David can organize 24,000 gatekeepers and a 288-piece orchestra without high-speed internet or a project management app, you can probably manage to get your term papers in by Friday. Class dismissed. Go find your own Zabdi and get some wine. Or, just some coffee. I'll see you on Wednesday.